Hello. Hi there. My name is Yalda, and I'm going to be presenting a decentralized autonomous space agency with Aragon at its core. I'm a co-founder of an organization called Space Cooperative, but also we're creating a DAO called Space Decentral. So basically, a little bit of background about me is I was a product manager and UX designer for about 10 years, and prior to Space Decentral, I was a senior product manager at Oracle, where I worked on their enterprise resource planning suite, and I also have a bachelor's of science and mechanical engineering from Berkeley and an astronautical engineering certificate from UCLA. So what is a decentralized autonomous space agency? Basically, it's decentralized because a single corporation or nation will not be responsible for its management. It's autonomous because there will be member control over how work is directed, how decisions are made, and which projects to fund. And it's a space agency because the purpose is to strategically develop a space plan so we can action with meaningful impact. This is not just a Kickstarter for space missions. It's about really creating a roadmap that will be citizen-led. So right now, what is Space Decentral? Right now, it's a social network where you can join and find different missions to collaborate with people on. The social network's not really on the blockchain yet. It's just like reducing the barriers to entry. The purpose is to build a community. But basically, how does Aragon fit into all of this? Basically, that will be our governance system that we will use whenever decisions are made for which projects to fund and like how work will be allocated. But basically, the goal is to do as many open source space missions as possible. If any of you are in aerospace industry, you'll probably hear open source aerospace and be like, well, how can you do that with ITAR or export control regulations, especially as US citizens? Well, we think that there are a lot of things that you can still do in an open source manner, and we want the network, we're gonna facilitate working on stuff that we know is easy to do online collaboratively. So yeah, why Aragon? Basically, like the vision of Aragon about how it's like building tools for the next generation of organizations to take advantage of this decentralized decision making. It's completely in line with Space Decentral's vision, and like the whole purpose of open source is to not reinvent the wheel. So why should we reinvent the wheel with creating a governance platform when one already exists where we can take advantage of that open source, the open source work that's already been done, and since they've built it as an operating system, we can start to build the applications on top of their system that are missing that would like meet the needs of our organization. So like I said before, my background was in enterprise resource planning, and basically to have like a space agency on the blockchain, you are gonna need a very complex ERP suite, like DAO enterprise software. So that's the roadmap that we see for Aragon, not just a tool to like fund different things with like decision making, but actually like how are we going to plan work for our enterprise as a DAO? So at the base of Aragon OS is the access control list, and this basically determines the different roles in the organization and what authorizations or permissions that people have for whether it's using different features in the application, the different types of votes you might want to do, how upgrades may occur. And this is very important when building a space agency because there are going to be a lot of different actors in the ecosystem, and you're going to want to restrict the decision making for different types of people. It's not about building like a hierarchical organization, but it's just like someone that's an expert on Mars might not necessarily be an expert on the moon. So you can have the permissions designed in such a way that people that are working on Mars, they can work and vote on the Mars missions. People that are working on the moon can vote and work on the moon missions. So how is the ecosystem going to work? Basically, it's also the other unique aspect about Space Decentral. It's a 2-token ecosystem. So one token is FTL, or faster than light, and the other one is the Space Decentral network token. And basically, they represent different things. So we thought it would be important to break it apart. So the Space Decentral network token, that is a token that only people can earn by completing tasks. It cannot be purchased unless someone decides to sell it on a decentralized exchange individually, but it's like SpaceT Central will never be selling SDN tokens. These will be, kind of staked against tasks, kind of like with a bounty system, and as people complete tasks, they can earn it. So if a lot of you have heard about like Colony, and how they have like, tokens against tasks that you can earn. This is similar to like that kind of mechanics, but it is a ERC-20 that will have very special things programmed into it. Basically, if the network generates revenue, the percentage of SDN that you hold will determine your reward share. So if you see the little graph there. And then the other token is the faster than light token, and this can be purchased. And this basically gives people influence over the higher level development of the space program. So basically, if you think of like range voting, where you might have 100 FTL, and you say, okay, I want 28.6% to go towards Earth, 23% to go to Mars, 47% to go to the moon. So as a token holder, you can divide up your vote for the space programs based on how many FTL you hold. I'm going to go through an example for that later. So within the ecosystem, there are different stakeholders. One, you have the members, and they are the primary governing body of the ecosystem. So it's not everything a token-weighted FTL vote. A lot of it is a member vote. And then next is the council. This might be something that we won't start off with, but you'll see as the network grows, the members might find it important to create a council, because whenever you're selecting space missions, they are going to be 100-page proposals or so, and not everyone is going to have the time or the knowledge to read through a proposal and understand the engineering and to be able to say, well, that actually is a valid design for a lunar rover. So at least the council will kind of be this backup entity to make sure that we will be able to vet missions, with the correct engineering, correct technical skills, and maybe even monetization, business type of vetting as well. Then you have project teams. So within the network, there are going to be, an RFP process, which is a request for proposals process, and that is how we imagine if there are a lot of different competing ideas within the ecosystem, people will have to submit proposals to the different RFPs, and then there will have to be a vetting process to determine which project gets added to the space plan, essentially. So project team, that can just be really anyone. You don't have to be a member, but you can just be a contributor. You don't have to have any tokens to form a project team, but you can start to win tokens if you submit a proposal into the ecosystem and it gets adopted. Angels, that's just a term that we're using to use for the financial contributors of the ecosystem. They're not necessarily making the day-to-day like member decision making. They're not necessarily on the project team. They're the people that might want to purchase a lot of FTL to influence the work of the network. So if, for example, like Elon Musk thought, oh, this is a great way to develop open source ideas for Mars, he could buy a lot of FTL and just like have his vote so the network is working on Mars. So it can be people that have an interest on the labor of the network. They really want to have like more open source or more science done for a specific type of program, and that's why they might want to contribute more financially to the ecosystem. Then you would have affiliates, and there are different things that the network is doing. It can be developing software, whether it's like software to make an aerospace organization more efficient. You might want to even like start to host that as like a software as a service. It might be producing media, but affiliates are kind of like not exactly governing members, but people that are utilizing the services of the network. So like I said before, Aragon will be at the core of a lot of the different decision making for like the members and the council especially, and then the angels for the program level FTL votes. So we will likely have to like make some enhancements or tweaks or modules to have the voting work for our organization. So I'm going to explain more about how the angel voting shares work. So basically, the other thing to take into consideration whenever we're building this network is you don't want people to just kind of like purchase FTL, vote for the space program, and then sell it the next day, because they're just like trying to mess with your space program. They're like, let's just put everything on Pluto, you know, like we don't want people that don't really have a stake in the ecosystem to just mess with the space program. So if you want to do the program level FTL vote, you're gonna have to, this is the current design, this can totally change, but you're gonna have to lock your FTL for 1 year, or you're gonna have to hold it for 1 year. And basically your voting power will also start to vest beyond that, up to 5 years, and it'll vest every quarter. So if you have it locked for 1 year and 3 months, then your voting power becomes 1.25. So each quarter, your voting power increases up until 5x, so up until 5 years. So this is a way to kind of like, if you get in early and like just like lock in a few tokens, and after a few years, your voting power for the space program can increase. So for example, let's say that the FTL holders are trying to decide between Earth, Mars, or the Moon. And then they do some range voting, and you see, like, for example, Patrick in the 3rd row, he just wants all on the Moon, and then Susie in the top row, she wants like a third of each. And then after that, you kind of come up with your space program, and this essentially determines how many SDN tokens that the network mints for the labor, essentially. So based on the FTL vote, now we know how the labor of the network should be directed. So this is a flow diagram of like the RFP process, the request for proposals that gets sent out. There are different project teams. There are also peer reviewers within the network. They help you know, provide their reports on if the solutions are viable or not. And then you have like the council that can ultimately review all of the work that the peer reviewers have done, and then select or say this is what we think should be the recommended solution. So there can still be governing processes after that, where even if the council recommends this as the best solution, there can, you know, be deliberation if a lot of people, you know, might disagree for some reason. So it's nothing is fully locked in. So the different voting privileges, basically, this describes the member and council. So the members would be able to determine the project ideas to develop into RFPs, determining the amount of tokens to allocate to the RFPs. You know, even though you might have 30% Moon, within Moon, you would have different RFPs, like we want a rover for the Moon, we want a GPS constellation for the Moon. So you decide after you have the budget how much you want to slice and dice into the different proposals. So how do you get a member voting share? This is based on the SDN that you collect in the network. So all of the tasks, they'll have SDN staked against them. The full-time, you know, core team of a space decentral network will also be doing their work, you know, collecting these same points, and that determines like the baseline for the 100th percentile. So that's how you get like 4 voting shares. So you use that as a benchmark to see how much everyone else is contributing, and if there are people like that are outside of the core team that are contributing just as much, they also get 4 voting shares. So this is kind of like think of like 4 voting shares as like the full amount of shares you can get. And this is like somewhat Sybil resistant because it's like based on human labor, you know, how much a person is putting into the system. I know we have to think about like, oh, well, what if someone just outsources a lot of people to complete a lot of tasks for the space program? Well, it's like, okay, if someone really wants to do that, they're managing a workforce, I guess. But this is also stuff that's like up for debate, and we're gonna be working through it. So the other part of the ecosystem, like there is that competitive RFP process, but there will also be an open source process, especially after you select a winning solution. The solution is really like a project plan. So that project plan needs to be broken out into tasks, and then you have to start allocating, you know, tokens against those tasks. So there will be, you know, like a consensus type planning poker tool that we will build on top of Aragon that you can use to do like bulk bounties in a collective manner, as opposed to just one person saying this is what the bounty should be. So this is we submitted a proposal for a Nest grant for Aragon to build a planning app within there. And this shows a little mock-up of how you might want to integrate it with GitHub to begin with, and you can start to potentially do like range voting, curation type of, you know, curation type of market for whether it's issues or projects. So these are some things that we're gonna start to experiment with. So this is an idea for how you might want to evaluate like how many SDN a task is worth. as a DAO, you would say our minimum wage is whatever, 20 euros an hour, our maximum wage is 60 euros an hour, you know? So that's how you would get like the skill level table right there. So you agree on like what your minimum and maximum wage is, and then you come up with what your like, you know, multipliers would be for priority, and then whenever you're estimating how long a task will take, this computes the amount of SDN that that task would have. And then, you know, you still need to do quality assurance, so there would have to be some kind of reviewers within the ecosystem that are then rating the work. And then, you know, if it was rejected, then no, the person doesn't earn the SDN, but if it got accepted, then they do earn it, potentially more than it was originally worth. You can also add bonuses too, potentially. And then, yeah, so then now I want to talk about finance because before I was giving like different examples of, you know, what can be some revenue sources. Okay, well this can be a network that, you know, you're a space agency, but you might want to just create a sci-fi franchise too to help fund it. So that can be one project. If you're planning a mission to the moon and you're like, let's like mine some helium-3, you could sell commodity futures, space operations. You can like charge people tokens to operate a rover. You could pre-sell tickets to the moon. Like I said before, software as a service, consulting services, people outside of the network that aren't members submitting proposals, you know, charging a small fee for that. So these can be like the different revenue sources. And what you can also decide as a DAO is, okay, well, based on that revenue, how much should we send to the different accounts? So you would have, like, for example, one account for the rewards engine. That's where you're distributing it back to the workers based on how much SDN they hold. You know, you want to ensure that you can keep sending out like bounties for proposals or open source projects. So you want to budget some amount for that, and then budget some amount for actually funding the projects themselves, because funding a proposal is one thing, but the project is another thing. Growing the core team, the goal will be to grow the core team from the workers of the DAO. So it's not just like, you know, we're co-founders, we're going to hire all the people. Like, we're going to have a hiring process work within the DAO. So you decide, how does someone become part of the core team? And then like land, facilities, and equipment. If you want to start to kind of purchase spaceport, like an island, to start to build a space elevator, you know, you can start to figure out how should we budget for that. So yeah, Aragon Finance, we hope to be using this to plan all of the different accounts and then have the governance in place for how, you know, how each of those values would be updated. You're like, maybe as a DAO, we will update our budget percentages on a yearly basis. So different things like that you would have to set in motion. So yeah, this is just a little, like the end of the presentation, a little thought experiment. If 100 million people just contributed $16 a month, we would have the same budget as NASA. Like, it's like, there's nothing stopping us from creating a citizen-led space agency. It's just, it's really up to us. And now, like, with the blockchain, with the transparency, with these processes, it's like the technology is finally at a state where we can do this, and we can like be a part of it. You don't have to ask for permission to be part of the space agency. You don't have to be a citizen of a nation. You don't have to have a SpaceX like in your country. It's like we can do it together. So that is the closing thought, is like, yeah, let's build a fucking space agency. And then, yeah, so right now you can join spacedecentral.net, and literally people are planning a mission to the moon right now. So we have, like, you know, former retired NASA people like already doing a ConOps for that, and you know, we haven't decided yet what the first mission is. So we're just like seeing what ideas are popping up, and you know, they're coming along. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, any questions?